Forget the sudden shock of dramatic violence for a moment, and consider something far more chilling, far more insidious, a tiny baby, left for days, perhaps weeks, to lie helpless in her own waste. Imagine the stench, the filth, the agonizing discomfort, and then, the horror of insects, crawling, consuming, feeding on her delicate skin as her unheard cries fade into the silence. This isn't just neglect, it's a slow-motion execution of innocence. Prepare yourself to witness the harrowing details of this unimaginable cruelty. Welcome to Crime Stories Network. I thank you my viewers for your support as we keep bringing true crime stories especially against children abuse, neglect and exploitation. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Alana Mae Eiland, just 14 months old. By all accounts, a happy baby. Those who knew her spoke of a contagious laugh, a bright-eyed curiosity about the world, a spirit that was, in a word, adventurous. She was at that beautiful stage of toddlerhood, discovering her feet, her voice, her place in her family. Her mother was Jennifer Eiland, 32 years old, living in Pensacola, Florida. To the outside world, perhaps just another single mom trying to make ends meet. But Jennifer carried a history, a shadow that stretched back years and across state lines to Alabama. Whispers followed her. Unsubstantiated allegations from the past, accusations of mistreatment of children in her care. Years ago. Dismissed, some said. Exaggerated, others claimed. But the whispers, they lingered. Recently, Jennifer had fought to reunite her family. Children had been in foster care. Now, they were back home. A fresh start. A chance to prove the past was just, the past. Everyone hoped so. Perhaps even Jennifer herself. But beneath the surface of this hoped for new beginning, a different reality was taking hold. A reality hidden behind closed doors, in the stifling Florida heat, in a house that would soon become known for something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. August 2013. Pensacola, Florida. Summer heat hung heavy in the air. Life, for most in this neighborhood, went on as usual. Kids played in sprinklers, neighbors chatted over fences, cars went by on errands. Just another hot, humid day in August. No one could have known that this ordinary day was about to become anything but. This was the day everything would change. The day the unthinkable would be dragged into the light. It was a neighbor who found her. Just 80 feet from her own home. A seemingly impossible distance, and yet, a world away from safety. Imagine the scene, a quiet landscaping pond, the kind you might find in any suburban yard. Tranquil on the surface. But on this day, it held a horror no one was prepared for. Alana Mae. 14 months old. Unresponsive. Floating in that water. How long had she been there? Minutes? Hours? No one knew for sure at first. But one thing was terrifyingly clear, something was terribly, terribly wrong. Neighbors reacted instantly. Panic mixed with disbelief. How could this happen? Right here. In broad daylight. The quiet of the afternoon shattered. Shouts. Frantic phone calls. The first responders arrived quickly, sirens wailing, lights flashing, cutting through the ordinary suburban afternoon. Paramedics rushed to the pond's edge. Every second counted. But was it already too late? What went through their minds, those first responders, as they pulled that tiny, lifeless body from the water? What did they see? What did they feel? Imagine being the one to lift a 14-month-old child from a pond, knowing something was deeply, irrevocably wrong. Knowing you might be holding a life that had already slipped away. Was this a tragic accident? A terrible, heartbreaking accident? That's what everyone desperately wanted to believe. A toddler, wandering off, drawn to the water, a moment of terrible misfortune. Accidents happen. Don't they? The flashing lights of the sheriff's cruisers painted the quiet street in stark reds and blues. The Escambia County Sheriff's Office arrived on scene, and the initial assumption of a tragic accident began to shift. Something didn't quite add up. A 14-month-old, wandering off and falling into a pond. 80 feet from home. Possible, yes. But probable? Detectives started to ask questions. The kind of questions that quickly peel back the surface of a story and reveal what lies beneath. The first thing they learned. Unsupervised play. It was routine. Neighbors spoke of it hesitantly at first, then with a growing sense of unease. Baby Alana Mae and her siblings, often outside, alone. Sometimes for long stretches of time. No fences, no watchful eyes, just children, on their own. Near the pond. Near the street. Vulnerable. Were these just kids being kids? Or was something more troubling going on? And then there were the whispers about the house itself. Not just unsupervised play, but the living conditions. Again, neighbors spoke in hushed tones, reluctant to judge, but the stories, they started to paint a picture. An unsettling picture. Unsanitary. Cluttered. Not quite right. Had anyone actually seen inside the Eiland home recently? What was really going on behind those closed doors? What was going on with Jennifer Eiland? Background checks. Standard procedure. But what those checks revealed, that's when the pieces started to click into a far darker, far more disturbing pattern. Alabama. Years before. Jennifer Eiland's name, linked to allegations. Allegations of abuse. Of neglect. Children removed from her care. Foster care. And then, reunification. A second chance. Or a cycle repeating itself. These were just allegations, from years ago, in another state. Could they be dismissed? Should they be dismissed? Or were they a warning sign, flashing red, screaming to be noticed? Had the system failed to see the pattern? Had neighbors missed the signs? Or worse, had they seen, and simply, looked away? Was Alana Mae's death a tragic accident? Or was it the devastating, inevitable outcome of something far more preventable? The investigation moved quickly. The evidence mounted. The whispers of the past became shouts in the present. Just days after Alana Mae was found in that pond, the Escambia County Sheriff's Office made an arrest. Jennifer Eiland. Her own mother. Charged. Not with accident. Not with misfortune. But with crimes. Serious crimes. Negligent manslaughter. Child neglect. The charges were stark, accusatory, laying bare the terrible reality that investigators now believed: Alana Mae's death wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of neglect. Of a failure to protect. Of a mother's failure. The legal wheels began to turn. But for many, the wheels of justice seemed to grind too slowly, too painfully slowly, in the face of such a profound loss. Pensacola reeled. Shock gave way to grief. Grief hardened into anger. How could this happen here? In their town? To a baby? The name Alana Mae was on everyone's lips. Her picture in every news report. A tiny face, now a symbol of unimaginable tragedy. People wanted answers. They wanted accountability. They wanted justice. The arrest of Jennifer Eiland was a step. But for many in the community, it felt insufficient. Negligent manslaughter. Neglect. Were these charges enough to truly capture the horror of what had happened to Alana Mae? Did they reflect the full weight of responsibility? Could any legal charge truly bring justice for a baby who had suffered such unimaginable neglect in her final months, weeks, days, hours? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as Jennifer Eiland was taken into custody. And the long, difficult road to understanding, and to healing, was only just beginning. Months passed. The shock in Pensacola slowly shifted to a grim anticipation. The trial of Jennifer Eiland. The courtroom became the stage where the story of Alana Mae would be dissected, examined, and judged. The weight of that tiny life, lost too soon, hung heavy in the air of that courtroom. The prosecution laid out their case, piece by agonizing piece. The 911 call played for the jury, a mother's voice, strained, reporting her baby unresponsive in a pond. But then, the evidence of what came before that call. The testimony from investigators who had entered the Eiland home. The photographs, not shown to the viewers, but described in stark, clinical terms by those who had seen them. The filth. The stench. The infestation. Medical professionals took the stand. Their testimony was chilling. They spoke of a baby brought to the emergency room in a state of unimaginable neglect. Severe diaper rash, down to the bone. Bacterial infections raging through her tiny body. Dehydration. Malnutrition. And then, the insects. Maggots. Feeding on living flesh. The doctors described it as the worst case of child neglect they had ever encountered. Some jurors visibly recoiled. How could any human being inflict such suffering on a child? The defense, they didn't deny the tragedy. They didn't deny the neglect. But they argued, circumstances. Difficulties. A mother overwhelmed. Not evil, they claimed, but incapable. They painted a picture of Jennifer Eiland as someone struggling, someone who made terrible mistakes, but not someone who intentionally sought to harm her child. Was it convincing? Could any explanation truly excuse such horrific neglect? Days turned into weeks. The trial dragged on. Each piece of evidence, each word of testimony, adding weight to the scales of justice. The jury listened. They watched. They absorbed the terrible details of Alana Mae's short, tragic life. And then, it was time. Time for them to decide. Guilty, or not guilty. Of negligent manslaughter. Of child neglect. The fate of Jennifer Eiland, and in a way, the memory of Alana Mae, rested in their hands. The weight was agonizing. For the community. For the family. For everyone who had followed this horrific case. What would the verdict be? Would it bring closure? Would it bring justice? Or would it leave more questions, more anger, more unresolved pain? What do you think the jury was thinking as they deliberated? Could you have made such a decision, knowing what they knew? The verdict was read. Guilty. Negligent manslaughter. Child neglect. Jennifer Eiland stood to hear her fate. The courtroom held its breath. The community waited, watching, listening. What price would she pay for the life of Alana Mae? What sentence could truly reflect the magnitude of such a loss? The judge spoke. His words echoed through the silent courtroom. 24 years. Prison. 24 years for the negligent manslaughter of her own daughter. Consecutive sentences for the child neglect charges, adding to the weight of the punishment. A significant prison term. A sentence intended to reflect the gravity of the crime, to hold Jennifer Eiland accountable for her unimaginable failure to protect baby Alana Mae. For some, the sentence felt like justice. A measure of accountability, at least. For others, it was still not enough. No sentence could bring back Alana Mae. No punishment could truly erase the horror of what she had endured. The community was left to grapple with the aftermath. With the terrible truth that such darkness could exist in their town. That such profound neglect could happen behind closed doors, unnoticed, until it was too late. And what of Jennifer Eiland's other children? They had been removed from her care before Alana Mae's death. Now, with their mother facing decades in prison, their family was irrevocably broken. What would their lives be like now? How would they process the loss of their baby sister, the horrific circumstances of her death, and the imprisonment of their own mother. The ripple effects of this tragedy extended far beyond Alana Mae herself, touching countless lives, leaving scars that might never fully heal. Alana Mae Eiland is gone. Her life, tragically short, brutally overshadowed by neglect and loss. Jennifer Eiland is in prison, facing the consequences of her actions. The community of Pensacola is left to remember, to reflect, to ask themselves, how could this have happened? What could have been done differently? And what can be learned from this devastating story, to protect other vulnerable children, to prevent such horrors from ever happening again? What do you take away from this tragic case? What lessons should we learn from the short, painful life of Alana Mae? The story of Alana Mae Eiland is a tragedy that should never have happened. A stark and brutal reminder of the vulnerability of children, and the devastating consequences of neglect. As we reflect on this case, what are the lessons we must learn? What can we take away from this heartbreaking story to prevent future tragedies? One crucial lesson is the absolute, unwavering importance of child supervision. Children, especially infants and toddlers, are entirely dependent on adults for their safety and well-being. Neglect isn't always intentional malice, sometimes it's a slow slide into inattention, overwhelmed circumstances, or a failure to recognize the signs of a child in danger. But the consequences, as we've seen, can be catastrophic. And then there's the role of community vigilance. It takes a village, the saying goes. But what happens when the village doesn't see? Or doesn't act? Neighbors in Pensacola admitted they had heard whispers, seen signs. But did fear of interfering, fear of being wrong, silence them? We must ask ourselves, what is our responsibility to the children in our communities? When do whispers become shouts for help that we cannot ignore? If you suspect a child is being neglected, please, don't look away. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Report it. Your call could be the lifeline a child desperately needs. Reach out to Child Protective Services. Talk to a trusted authority. It's better to be wrong than to stand by and witness a tragedy unfold. And beyond reporting, consider how you can support families in your community who might be struggling. Offer help, offer resources, offer compassion. Prevention starts with awareness, and action starts with each of us. The story of Alana Mae is heartbreaking, but by understanding these true crime stories, by confronting the darkness, we can learn to protect the innocent and strive for a safer world. If you're interested in more in-depth true crime stories that explore complex cases and the pursuit of justice, please subscribe to our channel. Join our community as we delve into the cases that challenge us, make us think, and hopefully, inspire us to action. What steps can you take, in your own community, to be more vigilant and protect vulnerable children? Let's continue this conversation in the comments below.